The cold darkness of space held many secrets, but none more terrible than the ship that moved through it now. The Kethmori vessel Devourer's Maw was built for one purpose: taking people who could not fight back and selling them like animals. Commander Zixthara stood on the bridge, her 6 eyes scanning the empty space ahead. Her gray skin showed no emotion as she watched her prey through the viewing screen. The human ship New Dawn floated helpless in the void. Its engines were dead. Its weapons were silent. The small colony vessel had been carrying 300 families to a new world when their faster-than-light drive broke down. Now they drifted in space like a wounded animal, waiting for predators to find them. Captain Valinok entered the bridge with heavy steps. His massive frame filled the doorway as he looked at the human ship. Like all Kethmori, he had thick armor, plating covering his body and claws that could tear through metal. He had raided hundreds of ships before. This would be easy work. The humans have tried to send distress calls, Valinok reported to his commander. We blocked all their signals. No one knows they are here. Zixthara nodded with satisfaction. The Kethmori had perfected the art of taking slaves over many centuries. They knew how to cut off escape routes and crush hope before their victims even knew what was happening. The galaxy feared them because they left no witnesses and took no prisoners who could not work. Begin the boarding operation, she ordered. Take the adults for the labor markets. Leave the old and sick behind. They are worth nothing to us. The human ship grew larger as the Devourer's Maw moved closer. Through the viewing ports, Zixthara could see lights moving inside the colony vessel. The humans were still alive and trying to fix their ship. They had no idea that death was about to visit them. Inside the New Dawn, Lieutenant Jake Morrison ran through the corridors with panic building in his chest. The young security officer had served in Earth's military before joining the colony. Mission. He knew what those strange signals on the scanner meant. Pirates, slavers, maybe something worse. All families to emergency stations, he called over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. Prepare for hostile boarding. The corridors filled with frightened voices as parents grabbed their children and ran to safe rooms. Jake knew these hiding places would not protect them for long, but they might buy him enough time to send one last message. Amy Chun was only 10 years old, but she understood that something terrible was happening. Her mother Sarah held her hand tightly as they ran toward the emergency shelter. Around them, other families moved with the same desperate speed. Baby Emma Martinez cried in her father's arms. The Johnson twins, Katie and Lisa, stayed close together as their parents led them through the maze of hallways. "Why are we running, Mom?" Amy asked, but her mother did not answer. The fear in Sarah's eyes told Amy everything she needed to know. In the ship's communication center, Jake Morrison worked with shaking hands to send Earth a message. The alien ship was jamming most of their signals, but he had one chance to use. An old military code that might get through. "This is New Dawn to Earth Defense Command," he whispered into the microphone. "Package secured. Wolves at the door." The words seemed simple, but they carried a meaning that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Package secured meant the colonists had hidden something important. Wolves at the door meant hostile aliens with unknown capabilities. But most important of all, Jake Morrison had used the one code that meant children were in danger. The alien. Cutting beams sliced through the New Dawn's hull like knives through paper. Atmosphere rushed out into space as the Kethmori boarding pods attached themselves to the ship. Within minutes, armed raiders poured through the breaches. Captain Valinok led the assault team with practiced efficiency. His soldiers moved through, the ship like hunters tracking wounded prey. They had done this so many times that it felt routine. Find the humans. Separate the valuable ones from the worthless ones. Load them onto the slave ship. move to the next target. But something was different about this raid. The humans fought back with a fury that surprised even these experienced slavers. A maintenance worker named Carlos Mendez attacked 3 Kethmori soldiers with nothing but a wrench before they brought him down. Teacher Maria Santos used her own body to shield a group of children from alien weapons. Most surprising of all was the way the adult humans looked at their captors. Other species showed fear or despair when the Kethmori came for them. But these humans had something else in their eyes, something that made even the battle-hardened raiders feel uncomfortable. The aliens rounded up their prisoners in the ship's main cargo bay. They separated families with cold efficiency, putting adults in one group and children in another. Kethmori had learned that keeping families apart made slaves easier to control. 30-7 human children stood together in a small cluster, their ages ranging from toddlers who could barely walk to teenagers almost old enough to be adults. Amy Chun tried to comfort the crying babies, while 15-year-old Alex Rivera counted heads and tried to remember everything his father had taught him about staying calm in emergencies. Dr. Mektar, the ship's science officer, studied the human captives with interest. In all his years of research, he had never seen a species react this way to capture. Most beings accepted their fate once they realized escape was impossible. But these humans seemed to be getting more dangerous, not less. The adult specimens show unusual stress responses, he reported to Commander Zixthara. Their heart rates are increasing rather than decreasing. They appear to be entering some kind of heightened state. Zixthara dismissed his concerns with a wave of her clawed hand. She had enslaved dozens of species over her long career. Humans were just another primitive race that would learn to obey or die. As the new dawn was stripped of everything valuable, the Kethmori prepared to leave. They had taken 112 adults and 37 children. The remaining colonists were left on the dying ship to face the cold emptiness of space. The Devourers. Maw jumped into faster-than-light travel with its cargo of human slaves. In the slave holds, parents called out to children they could no longer see. Children cried for mothers and fathers who had been taken away. The sound echoed through the ship like the howling of wolves, but the aliens could not hear what the humans were really saying. Hidden in those cries of pain was something else, a promise, a threat, a declaration of war written in the most ancient language of all, the fury of parents whose children had been stolen. Light years away on Earth, Admiral Christina Hayes received Jake Morrison's message. She read the simple words over and over again, her face growing harder with each repetition. Then she reached for the red communication device that she had hoped never to use. "This is Admiral Hayes," she said into the device. "Activate protocol 7. Total war authorization. All units are to prepare for immediate deployment." In the depths of space, the Kethmori ship carried its human cargo toward the slave markets, completely unaware that they had just made the greatest mistake in the history of their empire. They had taken the children of the most protective species in the galaxy. And humanity was coming for them. The slave ship Devourer's maw moved through space like a metal tomb filled with misery. In the lower decks, human prisoners sat in cages designed for creatures much smaller than them. The alien builders had never expected to hold beings as large as humans, so the captives had to bend their backs and fold their legs just to fit inside. Amy Chun pressed her small face against the cold metal bars of her cage. Around her, other human children tried to sleep on the hard floor. Baby Emma Martinez would not stop crying, and her sobs echoed through the dark corridors. A 10-year-old girl reached through the bars to touch the baby's tiny hand. "It's okay, Emma," Amy whispered. "My mom used to sing to me when I was scared. Do you want me to sing to you?" The little girl's voice was soft and sweet, as she began to hum a lullaby her mother had taught her. Other children in nearby cages began to listen. Even some of the older kids, like Alex Rivera, stopped trying to plan escapes and focused on Amy's. Gentle song. Dr. Mektar walked through the prisoner section with his electronic notebook in hand. The Kefmori scientist was studying the humans like they were animals in a zoo. He wrote down notes about their behavior and took pictures of their faces. But what he saw confused him more each day. The adult humans were acting stranger than any species he had ever studied. They should have been getting weaker and more hopeless as time passed. Instead, they seemed to be getting stronger and more dangerous. The males paced in their cages like wild beasts preparing to hunt. The females watched everything with sharp eyes that missed nothing. In the adult section of the ship, former Marine Sergeant Lucy Walker was counting steps and memorizing guard rotations. She had been captured during the raid on New Dawn, but her military training had not been turned off. Every day she learned more about the alien ship and its crew. The guards changed shifts every 6 hours, she whispered to the engineer Paul Thompson in the cage next to hers. There are always 2 of them in this section, but sometimes only one watches the corridors. Paul nodded and added his own observations. I've been listening to the engine sounds. This ship is old. The power systems make noises that shouldn't be there. If we could get to the right place, we might be able to cause some problems for them. Dr. Helen Brooks sat in her cage and watched the alien guards with the cold eyes of a doctor studying a disease. She had spent her whole career healing people, but now she was learning how to hurt the creatures that had stolen human children. Every species had weak points. Every living thing could be stopped if you knew where to strike. The aliens brought food twice a day. It was gray paste that tasted like metal and smelled like rotten eggs. Most of the humans could barely eat it, but they forced themselves to swallow every bite. They would need their strength for what was coming. Carlos Mendez had worked on machines his whole life. Even in his cage, he studied the alien technology around him. The locks were electronic. The lights were controlled by sensors. The air circulation system had vents that led all through the ship. Everything was connected, and everything could be broken if you knew how. These aliens think they're so smart, he muttered to Maria Santos in the cage across from him. But they build their machines just like we do. Metal and wires and power sources. All of it can be turned against them. Maria Santos had been a teacher before the colony mission. She had spent years learning how to talk to children and help them when they were scared. Now she used those same skills to keep the adult prisoners calm and focused. But inside her heart, a cold fire was growing stronger every day. Have you seen the children? She asked every guard who passed by. Are they getting enough food? Are they hurt? The aliens thought her questions showed weakness. They did not understand that she was mapping the ship by listening to how long it took guards to check on different sections. She was learning the layout of their prison by pretending to be a worried Mother Dot in the children's section. 15-year-old Alex Rivera was teaching the younger kids how to stay strong. His father had been a soldier, and Alex remembered every lesson about survival and resistance. He showed them how to exercise in small spaces. He taught them to memorize guard schedules and ship noises. We're not just prisoners, he told Amy Chun and the Johnson twins. We're gathering information. When the grown-ups come for us, we need to be ready to help them. Amy nodded seriously. Even at 10 years old, she understood that adults were planning something. She could see it in the way the human prisoners looked at each other. She could hear it in the way they whispered when the guards were far away. The days passed slowly in the metal belly of the slave ship. But each day, the human prisoners learned more about their captors. They discovered that the Kethmori had poor night vision. They found out which guards were lazy and which ones paid attention. They mapped every corridor and counted every weapon. Doctor Mektar noticed the changes, but could not understand what they meant. The humans were becoming more organized. They were sharing information through hand signals and quiet whispers. They were preparing for something, but the alien scientist could not figure out what. The specimens continued to show unusual behavior, he reported to Commander Zixthara. They appear to be communicating in ways we cannot detect. I recommend increased security measures. But Commander Zixthara was thinking about the profits she would make at the slave markets. Human children were rare and valuable. The adults were strong and could work in dangerous places where other species would die. She dismissed the scientist's worries as the fears of someone who spent too much time studying instead of fighting. Meanwhile, in the cold emptiness of space, something was happening that the Kethmori could not see or understand. The message that Jake Morrison had sent from the dying colony ship had reached Earth. It had been decoded by military computers and sent to the highest levels of human government. Admiral Christina Hayes stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters. Around her, dozens of officers worked at computer screens and communication devices. Red lights flashed on wall displays as ships were called back from distant missions. Emergency codes were transmitted to human colonies across the galaxy. How many ships can we gather? The Admiral asked her Chief of Staff. Every available vessel is being recalled, came the reply. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts. The response has been immediate and total. Admiral Hayes nodded. The message from the New Dawn had triggered Protocol 7, something that had never been used before in human history. It was the code for total war when human children were in danger. Every human ship, every human soldier, every human citizen was now part of the same mission. Across human space, the response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Grandparents left their retirement homes to crew cargo ships. Parents took leave from their jobs to join rescue missions. Teachers and doctors and factory workers all volunteered for the same cause, bringing the children home. The Kethmori had made many mistakes in their long history of taking slaves. They had attacked peaceful traders and stolen entire populations from their home worlds. But they had never made a mistake as deadly as this one. They had taken human children, and now they were about to learn why that was the most dangerous thing anyone could do in the galaxy. In her cage on the slave ship, Amy Chun continued to sing lullabies to the crying babies. But sometimes, when the guards were not looking, she would hum a different song. It was something her father had taught her, about brave people who never gave up and always came home. She knew her parents were coming for her. All the human children knew it. They could feel it in their bones, like animals sensing a storm before it arrives. The storm was coming, and when it hit, the Kethmori Empire would learn what it meant to threaten the children of humanity. The asteroid station Cordish hung in space like a giant metal spider with thousands of lights glowing from its many arms. Ships from across the galaxy came here to buy and sell things that most civilized worlds had banned long ago. Slaves, weapons, drugs, and worse things changed hands in the dark markets that filled the station's lower levels. The Devourers, Maw docked at one of the larger bays with a soft bump that shook through the ship's hull. Commander Zixthara looked out at the busy station and smiled with satisfaction. The slave markets here paid the best prices in this part of the galaxy. Her human cargo would make her rich. Inside the slave ship, the human prisoners felt the vibration as the vessel connected to the station. They had been traveling for 2 weeks, and every day had brought them closer to this moment. But they were not the same frightened colonists who had been captured from the New Dawn. Lucy Walker lay in her cage and listened to the sounds of docking clamps engaging. Her trained ear could tell that they had arrived somewhere big. The noises were different, from a ship-to-ship transfer. This was a space station, which meant crowds, confusion, and opportunity. "This is it," she whispered to Paul Thompson. "Whatever we're going to do, it has to be now." The engineer nodded and touched the small piece of metal he had been hiding. For days, it was part of a broken food dispenser that Carlos Mendez had damaged during what the guards thought was an accident. But Carlos was much more clever than the aliens realized. The metal piece was sharp enough to cut electronic wires. In the children's section, Amy Chun held baby Emma Martinez close to her chest. The 10-year-old girl had become like a big sister to all the younger children. She helped feed them, cleaned them when they were sick, and sang to them when they cried. But now her young face showed a calmness that seemed too old for her years. "Remember what Alex taught us," she whispered to Katie and Lisa Johnson. "When the doors open, we stay together. We help the little ones. We wait for the signal from the grown-ups." Alex Rivera had spent the long journey teaching the children how to move quietly, how to hide in small spaces, and how to recognize the sounds that meant danger or safety. The 15-year-old boy had turned the frightened kids into a team that could think and act together. Dr. Mektar walked through the prisoner sections one last time before the humans were taken to market. What he saw made his scales itch with worry. The adult humans had stopped pacing in their cages. Instead, they sat very still and watched everything with bright, focused eyes. It reminded him of predators, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Children were even more disturbing. They should have been crying and calling for their parents. Instead, they moved together like a school of fish, each one seeming to know what the others were thinking. When one child shifted position, all the others moved in the same direction. "Commander," Dr. Mektar called over the communication system, "I strongly recommend that we sell these humans quickly and leave this station. Their behavior has become highly unusual." But Commander Zixthara was already meeting with Grixpol, the chief auctioneer of Cordish Station. The alien slave trader was excited about the human cargo. Children from Earth were rare in the slave markets, and collectors across the galaxy would pay huge sums for them. "Bring them to the main auction hall," Grixpol instructed. "We will sell the adults first to warm up the crowd, then present the children as the special items of the day." The auction hall was a vast circular room with rising seats filled with buyers from dozens of different species. At the center was a platform where slaves were displayed for inspection. Bright lights made sure that every detail of the merchandise could be seen clearly. The first human adults were brought onto the platform in chains. Paul Thompson and Carlos Mendez stood side by side, their faces showing no emotion as alien voices called out bids for their lives. But hidden beneath their calm expressions, both men were counting guards and looking for weak points in the station security. Dr. Helen Brooks was sold to a mining company that needed workers for dangerous excavations. As the guards led her away, she caught the eye of Maria Santos and nodded once. The message was clear. The plan was still active. One by one, the adult humans were sold and taken away. But the buyers noticed something strange. Instead of the despair that usually marked newly enslaved beings, these humans seemed to be communicating with each other. They used tiny hand signals and brief eye contact to pass information, even as they were separated, that it was time for the children. 8-year-old Danny Park was the first child brought to the auction platform. The small boy stood in the bright lights and looked out at the crowd of alien buyers with steady eyes. He showed no fear, no tears, no begging. He just stood there like he was waiting for something to happen. The bidding for Danny was fierce. Representatives from research stations, wealthy collectors, and illegal fighting rings all wanted to own a human child. The price climbed higher and higher as different species competed for the rare prize. But as the bidding reached its peak, something unexpected began to happen. From somewhere in the station, a low sound began to echo through the metal corridors. It was not loud, but it seemed to vibrate through the walls and floors. It was a sound that made every parent in the galaxy remember their own children. The sound was coming from the humans. Lucy, Walker, and the other adult humans who had been sold were scattered throughout the station, but they were all making the yah. Same noise. It was not a scream or a cry for help. It was something much older and more primitive. It was the sound that parents made when their children were in danger. The noise spread through the station like a virus. Other enslaved beings began to respond, even though they did not understand why. Parents of every species recognized the call, and it awakened something deep in their hearts. The sound said one thing in every language: protect the young dot in that auction hall. The lights began to flicker. The station's computer systems were experiencing problems that the maintenance crews could not explain. Security cameras showed strange movement in the prisoner sections. Locked doors were opening by themselves. Emergency alarms were activating for no reason. Grick's pole tried to continue the auction, but the buyers were becoming nervous. The human child on the platform was still standing calmly, but now he was making the same low sound as the adults. Other children in the holding areas were joining in, creating a chorus that seemed to shake the station's foundation. What is happening? Commander Zixthara demanded as she entered the auction hall. Why are the systems failing? Dr. Mektar appeared at her side with fear in his 6 eyes. Commander, I believe we have made a terrible mistake. These humans are not behaving like any slaves we have ever taken. They are coordinating some kind of action across the entire station. The lights went out completely, plunging the auction hall into darkness. In the last moment before the blackout, security cameras captured an image that would haunt the survivors forever. The human adults who were still in chains had their eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like wild animals, and their faces showed not despair or fear, but anticipation. They had been waiting for this moment. In the darkness, the sound of the humans grew louder. It was joined by other voices as enslaved beings throughout the station began to understand what was happening. Parents were calling to their children. Children were calling back. And something ancient and powerful was awakening in the hearts of every being who had ever loved. Someone smaller and weaker than themselves, the Kethmori, had thought they were selling human slaves, but they had actually gathered together every parent on the station and given them a reason to fight. They had united species that had been enemies for centuries under one simple banner: save the children. Outside the station, long-range sensors detected multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The signatures were unfamiliar, but they were coming from the direction of human space. Lots of them. Commander Zixthara tried to call for help, but the communication systems were not responding. The humans had somehow turned the station's own technology against its owners. She was trapped in a place that was supposed to be safe, surrounded by enemies she had created with her own greed. The auction hall filled with the sounds of breaking chains and alien voices raised in anger. In the darkness, something was moving. Something was coming. And the Kethmori were about to learn that taking human children was not just wrong. It was the most dangerous mistake anyone could make in the galaxy. The darkness in the auction hall lasted only 30 seconds, but in that time the galaxy changed forever. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the scene was one of complete chaos. Broken chains lay scattered across the floor. Guard stations were empty, and the sound of fighting echoed from 17 different levels of Cordish Station. Lucy Walker moved through the corridors like a ghost made of anger. The former Marine sergeant had spent 2 weeks memorizing every detail of the station while pretending to be a helpless prisoner. Now she used that knowledge to lead groups of freed slaves through the maintenance tunnels that connected every section of the massive structure. 3rd level, Section 7, she whispered into a communication device taken from a fallen guard. 23 children held in maximum security. We need cutting tools and medical supplies. The response came from Paul Thompson, who had taken control of the station's main power grid. Tools coming your way through ventilation shaft C4. Medical team is Dr. Brooks and 5 others, approaching from the lower access tunnel. The uprising was not a wild riot driven by emotion. It was a carefully planned military operation that used the station's own systems against its owners. Every human adult had a specific job to do, and they carried out their tasks with the cold precision of professional soldiers. Carlos Mendez had found his way to the main computer center, where his years of working with machines made him more dangerous than any weapon. He sat at the alien control panels and turned the station's security systems into tools of liberation. Doors that should have kept prisoners locked up now opened at his command. Weapons that should have protected the guards now refused to fire. Life support is stable in all children's areas, he reported to the other humans. Guard communications are down. Automatic defenses are offline. The station belongs to us now. In the auction hall, Grixpol the auctioneer cowered behind his podium, as beings he had sold and tortured for years surrounded him. Parents of dozens of different species stood together, united by their shared hatred of anyone who harmed children. The alien slave trader had grown rich by breaking up families. Now those families were breaking him. Dr. Helen Brooks moved through the medical bay like an angel of mercy armed with terrible knowledge. She had spent her career healing people, but she also knew exactly how to hurt the creatures that had stolen. Human children. Her medical bag was full of supplies that could save lives or end them, depending on who needed her attention. Kethmori have 3 major nerve clusters, she explained to a group of freed slaves. Strike here, here, and here. They will be paralyzed but alive. We want information, not corpses. The children were the key to everything. Amy Chun led the younger ones through the station's service tunnels with the confidence of someone much older than 10. She had memorized the layout from listening to the adults' whispered conversations, and now she used that knowledge to guide the rescue teams to where they were needed most. The babies are in Section 12, she told Alex Rivera as they moved through a darkened corridor. Lisa Johnson is with them. Katie is helping the 6-year-olds in Section 9. Everyone is accounted for. Alex nodded and spoke into his stolen communicator. All children are secure and moving to Rally Point, Alpha. No injuries reported. Repeat, all packages are safe. The word packages made Lucy Walker smile grimly as she fought her way through a group of Kethmori guards. It was the same code that Jake Morrison had used in his final message from the New Dawn. The children were the packages, and the humans had indeed kept them secure. Commander Zeke Thara found herself trapped in her own command center as the station fell apart around her. Every screen showed the same impossible sight: humans leading coordinated attacks on positions that should have been impossible to find. Her security forces were being defeated by beings she had considered primitive animals. How are they doing? This? She screamed at Dr. Mektar, who was frantically trying to understand what was happening. They are just slaves. They should be broken and helpless. The scientist looked at his data readings with growing horror. Commander, I believe we have completely misunderstood this species. They are not acting like individuals. They are acting like a single organism with many parts. Every human knows what every other human is doing. The truth was even simpler than Dr. Mektar realized. The humans were not connected by technology or telepathy. They were connected by something much stronger: the absolute refusal to let anyone harm their children. That shared purpose made them more unified than any army that had ever existed. Maria Santos had found her way to the station's communication center, where she broadcast a message that reached every corner of Corbiche Station. Her voice was calm and clear as she spoke in the common galactic language that all species understood. Attention all beings held as slaves on this station. The humans offer you a choice. Help us save our children, and we will help you save yours. Fight with us, and we will take you home. Fight against us, and you will face the consequences of those who harm the innocent. The message was translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast on every frequency. Across the station, enslaved beings who had given up hope suddenly found reasons to fight again. The humans had turned the slave market into a liberation army. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Kethmori Guards were trained to fight individuals, not coordinated groups that seemed to know their every move before they made it. The station's defenses were designed to keep people in, not to fight an enemy that was already inside, and had control of the computer's dot. By the time the station's long-range sensors detected the approaching human fleet, the fight was already over. Commander Zixthara sat in chains in her own command center, surrounded by the children she had planned to sell. Amy Chun looked at the alien commander with the serious expression of someone much older than her years. "You made a big mistake," the 10-year-old girl said quietly. "You took us away from our families. Now our families are coming to take us home." The fleet that dropped out of faster-than-light travel around Cordish Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. There were military ships with guns that could destroy planets. There were cargo vessels converted into troop transports. There were luxury liners filled with doctors and teachers. There were even small private ships crewed by grandparents who had left their retirement homes to rescue children they had never met. Admiral Christina Hayes stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Righteous Fury and looked at the massive space station ahead of her. Her fleet contained over 300 ships and more than 500,000 volunteers. Every human colony had sent someone. Every human world had contributed ships and supplies. "This is Admiral Hayes to Cordish Station," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We have come for our children. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic law. Resist, and you will face the full fury of humanity." The response came from Maria Santos in the station's communication center. Her voice was tired, but filled with pride. "This is the human resistance aboard Cordish Station. Mission accomplished, Admiral. All packages are secure. The station is under our control. We are ready to come home." The reunion that followed became legend throughout the galaxy. Parents who had thought their children were lost forever held them again. Human medical teams treated injuries from dozens of different species. The rescued slaves from other worlds were given passage back to their home planets on human ships. But the most important moment came when Amy Chun was reunited with her mother Sarah in the docking bay of the Righteous Fury. A 10-year-old girl ran into her mother's arms and held her tight, but she did not cry. Instead, she looked up with the serious expression that had helped her take care of the other children. "I knew you would come," Amy said simply. "I told all the little ones that humans always come for their children. We never leave anyone behind." Sarah Chun held her daughter and looked around at the hundreds of other families being reunited. She saw parents from dozens of different species embracing children they had thought were lost forever. She saw human soldiers treating alien children with the same care they would show their own. The Kethmori Empire had thought they were capturing slaves. Instead, they had created the greatest liberation force the galaxy had ever seen. And at the center of it all were the children, whose innocence had reminded everyone what was truly worth fighting for. The battle for Cordish Station was over, but the war to protect the innocent had just begun. The wreckage of the Kethmori Empire spread across 3-star systems like the bones of a dead giant. In less than 6 months, the most feared slave trading organization in the galaxy had collapsed completely. Their ships were destroyed, their bases were captured, and their leaders were either dead or in prison waiting for trial. Admiral Christina Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Righteous. Fury and watched human ships patrolling the space around what used to be the Kethmori, home world. The planet below was now protected by a coalition of species that had united under one simple rule: no one hurts children. The last of their raiding fleets surrendered this morning, reported Captain Bobby Chun, Amy's older brother who had joined the rescue mission. Intelligence reports that remaining Kethmori forces are scattered and leaderless. The Empire is finished. The Admiral nodded with satisfaction, but her face remained serious. The destruction of the Kethmori was not revenge. It was a lesson that needed to be taught to every predator in the galaxy. Touch human children and face the consequences. On the planet New Hope, formerly known as Kethmori Prime, Amy Chun walked through the gardens that had been built where slave markets once stood. The 10-year-old girl was now 11, and the experiences of the past year had made her older in ways that numbers could not measure. She carried baby Emma Martinez, who had grown into a happy toddler who called Amy her big sister. The memorial is ready, Alex Rivera told Amy as he approached through the flowering trees. The teenager had grown taller during the year of fighting, and his face showed the confidence of someone who had helped change the galaxy. They want you to speak at the ceremony. Amy looked at the stone monument that rose from the center of the garden. It was carved with the names of every child who had been taken by the Kethmori over their long history of cruelty. Thousands of names in hundreds of languages, representing species from across the galaxy. At the top were simple words in the common galactic language: never again. The ceremony was attended by representatives from dozens of worlds. Parents who had lost children stood beside parents who had found them again. Species that had been enemies for centuries worked together to make sure that the horrors of the slave trade would never return. Amy Chun stepped up to the speaking platform and looked out at the crowd. She was small compared to many of the alien beings gathered there, but her voice carried clearly across the garden when she began to speak. My name is Amy Chun, and I am 11 years old. A year ago, bad people took me and my friends away from our families. They thought we were just things they could sell. They thought our parents would give up and forget about us. They were wrong. The crowd listened in perfect silence as the young girl continued. Human parents never give up on their children. But we learned something else during our adventure. Parents from every world, every species, every corner of the galaxy feel the same way. Love is the same everywhere. Protecting children is something that all good people understand. She paused and looked directly at a group of former Kethmori prisoners who had become some of her closest friends. We are here today not because humans are special, but because children are special. All children from all worlds. And anyone who tries to hurt them will have to face all of us together. The applause that followed was not loud or dramatic. It was the quiet, determined sound of beings who had made a promise and intended to keep it. Dr. Helen Brooks stood in the medical center that had been built on the ruins of the old slave processing facility. She was treating patients from a dozen different species, many of them children who had been rescued from other slave traders, inspired by the human example. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was becoming safer every day. The psychological profiles are remarkable, she reported to Admiral Hayes during their weekly conference call. These children show no lasting trauma from their captivity. The support networks we built, the way the older children took care of the younger ones, the certainty that rescue would come, it protected them from the worst effects. The Admiral smiled for the first time in months. Amy Chun and Alex Rivera have been visiting other worlds, teaching children how to stay strong if they are ever taken. They call it the Never Alone program. The response has been incredible. Across the galaxy, the story of the human rescue had become legend. But it was not told as a story about human superiority or military might. Instead, it became a teaching tool about the power of cooperation and the importance of protecting the innocent, Carlos Mendez had started a school on New Hope where former slaves learned technical skills that would help them rebuild their lives. His students came from dozens of different worlds, but they all learned the same lesson. Every being had value, and everyone deserved freedom and safety. Maria Santos ran the education center where children from rescued families learned alongside human kids. The classroom was a mixture of species and cultures that would have been impossible before the Kethmori incident. But the children played together, learned together, and grew up together as if differences in appearance and language meant nothing at all. Paul Thompson led the engineering teams that were converting old Kethmori bases into rescue stations and safe havens. Each facility was equipped with the most advanced communication systems in the galaxy, ensuring that no distress call would ever go unanswered again. Lucy Walker commanded the joint military force that patrolled the space lanes, hunting down missing remaining slave traders who thought they could continue their evil work. Her ships flew the flags of a dozen different worlds, crewed by beings who had learned that some things were worth fighting for. Commander Zixthara sat in her prison cell and read the reports about the collapse of everything she had once controlled. The former Kethmori leader could not understand how taking a few human children had led to the destruction of an empire that had lasted for centuries. Dr. Mektar, who was being held in the same facility, tried to explain what his research had finally revealed. We never understood what we were dealing with. Humans do not fight for territory or resources or power. They fight for their children. And when you threaten human children, you are not just fighting humans. You are fighting everyone who has ever loved a child. The old alien scientist looked out through the barred window at the garden, where children from many worlds played together in safety. We thought we were capturing valuable slaves, but we actually declared war on the most powerful force in the universe, the love of parents for their children. The final report on the Kethmori incident was filed by Admiral Hayes and sent to every government in the galaxy. It was not a military analysis or a political document. It was a simple warning written in language that every species could understand. The people of Earth wish to make one thing clear to all beings throughout the galaxy. We seek peace and friendship with all species. We offer trade, cooperation, and mutual aid to any world that wants our partnership. But we also give this promise. Any being or organization that harms human children will face the total response of humanity and all our allies. We will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to protect our young. This is not a threat. It is a fact. The message was translated into thousands of languages and broadcast on every frequency used for interstellar communication. But the real message was already spreading through the galaxy in a much more powerful way, through the stories told by parents to their children, by children to their friends, and by rescued slaves to their families. The story of Amy Chun and the other human children had become more than history. It had become a promise that echoed across the stars. In a galaxy full of darkness, there were still those who would fight for the light. And the brightest light of all was the love that protected the innocent. Amy Chun, now 12 years old, stood in her bedroom on New Hope and looked out at the stars. Tomorrow she would visit another world where children needed to learn that they were not alone. She would teach them the songs that had comforted her in the dark, the games that had kept hope alive, and the simple truth that had saved them all. Somewhere among those distant stars, there might be other children who were scared and alone, but they would not stay that way for long. Because the galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. You should never, ever take human children. And if you did, humanity would come for them. All of humanity. And they would not come alone.